Equivalent units of production. Oh boy, do I have a concept for you. Now, I wish this wasn't as important on the exam as it is. It's not the most important thing, but it's pretty solid and need to know. This is something I had absolutely no idea what it was when I sat for the exam. This is something I had to go back and relearn. And there are two approaches here, just like with everything. You can just memorize what I show you in terms of formulas. Also try to understand what is actually going on here. It's a theoretical concept. So the equivalent units of production is a theoretical concept that is used in process costing. This is just a fun fact, multiple choice question. So it's a theoretical concept. It's a term that is applied to the work in process inventory at the end of an accounting period. It is the number of completed units of an item that a company could theoretically have produced, given the amount of direct materials, direct labor, and manufacturing overhead costs incurred during that period for the items not yet completed. Again, this is a theoretical concept that is, and if you don't like how this sounds already, I've got formulas to just memorize, and you'll be able to just answer questions with those formulas. And that's good news. That's super good news. It's great to hear. So take a look, reread it, re-listen to it if you want to hear me say that again. But we're going to start diving into what this is. And again, I'm going to do my best to just show you how to answer the questions and just get done with it, right? You don't want to become an expert in this. Sure, you don't really care, and you want to just move on and pass the exam. Okay, here's a little blurb that we will talk about equivalent units of production with. So, Santa Fe Inc. has a manufacturing line that produces large quantities of machines. At the end of the most recent accounting period, Santa Fe had 10,000 machines still under construction. So this is work in process, right? We're going to see work in process for equivalent units of production. The manufacturing process for a machine requires that all materials be sent to the shop floor at the start of the process, and then a variety of processing steps are added before the widgets are considered complete. At the end of the period, Santa Fe had incurred 25% of the labor and manufacturing overhead costs that were required to complete the 10,000 machines. So, consequently, there were 10,000 equivalent units for materials and 2,500, so 25%, 2,500 equivalent units for direct labor and manufacturing overhead. This is an example of, again, the theoretical concept of equivalent units of production that Santa Fe can now analyze, and essentially just another way of breaking down and understanding their performance, what could have been done, taking their numbers and having another analysis of them. For our purposes, we don't care. We want to just answer questions, get free points in the exam, and move on. Am I right? Am I right, everyone? Yes. If you don't think I'm right, I don't know. I don't know what I would say then. But let's keep moving on, and time to show you how to just straight up answer these questions. Now, these questions, you can just treat them as formulas. If you're reading a question and it says, using FIFO, what are the materials costs? Or using FIFO, what are the conversion costs? You have three numbers that you need to get. You have number 1, 2, and 3. You add them all together. Question could also say, using the weighted average method, right? What are the materials costs? Or using the weighted average method, what are the conversion costs? And I'll very much show you a bunch of questions. I'm not going to just show you these formulas. I'll use these formulas and demonstrate for you how we're going to do it. And then you have step 1 and step 2, and then you just add these together. So write this down, memorize it, do what you got to do. I mean, definitely memorize this. This is how you'll answer these questions. If you don't even want to think about equivalent units of production, using this, you can answer 85 to 95% of all questions asked about equivalent units. And, if I do my math right, you just need a 75 to pass the exam. Now I know, the scoring is a whole different thing. But anyway, my job is to get you the most points as possible with the least effort as possible. Being said, you are going to put a lot of effort in because you're a hardworking individual, aren't you? I bet you are. So Here we go. I mean, even me just like reading these out loud aren't really it's not gonna mean much until we actually see the question. So just gonna put this here for you as a note to memorize. We're gonna use this exact process, this exact formula in our questions that we're about to see. And as we do these questions, I also recommend have the formulas next to you, right? Have them next to you so you can refer back to them as I'm doing these formulas and doing these questions. Okay, okay. We're going to be using this blob of information for all of the questions that are going to be asked. And I very much enjoy doing that because it shows if we just change one thing in the question, right? If we just change conversion costs or materials or weighted average or FIFO, right? What happens? You'll see. You'll see what happens if we just change one item and we have the same information. All right, so let's just break it down. We use a process cost system. This is just referring back to what I said. That could just be a multiple choice question. Knowing that equivalent units of production is used during the process cost system, which we remember that a process cost system is more for our homogeneous products. We're just pumping out one after another of identical products, right? We're producing packaging machines for the shipping industry. Following information pertains to operations for August. Just got some information, right? Beginning work in process, started production, what we complete production, ending work in process. The more cost information, beginning inventory is 70% complete for materials, 30% complete for conversion costs, and the ending inventory 80% for materials, 45 for conversion costs. Now, the difference here being if the question asks about materials, you're going to use these numbers. If the question asks for conversion costs, you'll use these percentages, right? Nothing crazy. That's the differences between conversion and materials. LIFO and FIFO, the difference is there is just which formulas I demonstrated for you, the FIFO and weighted average. Got some other costs that will come into play possibly. Not possibly, I mean, they will, but for you, unknowingly, not knowing what questions will be asked, possibly these will come into play. Let's start running through some questions. And I'm going to be flipping back to here and pulling our information because that's what we do, right? We write down our formula and then we just go back and only take the information we need because we don't want the fluff. We don't want the garbage that we don't need to answer the question. Well, the first question says using the FIFO method, and I also dictated here. So, as I said, we've got a bunch of questions based on the same information. Every question asked has its own letter. So, the first question is what are the equivalent units of production for materials? So, that's letter A. You can see here, here's the answer. And then I've got another question. What's the equivalent unit cost of materials for August? Letter B. There's our letter B. And then I'll have C, D, E, F, G. No one ever taught me the alphabet. I don't know what comes after that. But we don't go all the way to Z. Don't worry. We only have a few, but these are the most common that you'll be asked and you'll be ready for. What's the equivalent units of production for materials? And please memorize the formula I gave you. You did not? Well, here they are. Step 1, step 2, step 3. Step 1, you're going to take the work in process beginning times 100 minus the percentage of materials, the first one that is beginning complete. So just memorize it, right? The formula is beginning work in process, which is 20,000 units, and then 1 minus or 100% minus, right? The percentage complete for materials or conversion costs. In this case, we're doing materials. Super formula driven, right? Just plug and chug. So that's how we get 20,000 times 30%. That 30% comes from 100% minus 70%, and that's 6,000. So if you're like me and you want to just plug and chug formula this, because there really is no need to understand the whole what this is, equivalent units. Just memorize how to do it. That gets us 6,000, which we'll add to the next two numbers we get. Now step 2. Step 2 consists of the units completed and transferred out. Let's go see where those are. The units completed, okay, completed production during August. And it's to be assumed that they're all transferred out. If it says something specifically about them being transferred out, then read it. But you produce them, it's just to be assumed that they're transferred out. Okay, so that's 68,000. Then we subtract units in beginning inventory per our formula. beginning inventory, we have our 20,000. Wouldn't you know it, we already have our second number. Step 2 total, 48,000. There's our step 2 total. We're going to add these together and then add them as well to our step 3. Now, step 3 is the work in process ending times the percent completed at the ending. The work in process ending is 32,000 and ending inventory is 80% complete for materials. This one you do not do 1 minus the percent, you just use the 80% or whatever percent is given. And that's that. Here we go. It's 32,000 times 80% gets you 25,600. Add all three together, and there is your answer. So that's your equivalent units of production for materials. This is a common question that could be asked for equivalent units of production. Again, just memorize my steps that are broken down. Took me a while to come up with these. I'm sure they're out there somewhere, but I wanted to do it myself to make sure I understood the process so that I could give it to you in the best, most concise way. Now, question B, what is the equivalent unit cost of materials? Okay, so all this is saying is, well, what's the unit? So this is not dollars. This is just what's the units of production. Now, what's the unit cost? Okay, well, we're just going to take units, just like we would, like what's the cost per unit? We have a total cost of materials used. Total cost of materials used of 375 divided by equivalent units that we just calculated gets us equivalent unit cost of materials of $4.71 per unit. Is this a super formula driven one like I mentioned back on our formulas? No, it's just another question that could be asked. And it's really just asking what's the cost per materials. Awesome. Got done with A and B. So now, as I said, I like to just change one thing in the question using the same information to now see what would happen if we change one item. Well, so under FIFO, we're still under FIFO. We have our 3-step process. What are the equivalent units of production for conversion costs? Well, everything is the same except we use the different percentages here. And what are our different percentages? Well, instead of 70, so 1 minus 70 is 30, we're going to do 1 minus 30 is 70. And there's just a coincidence that they equal 100% here. This does not need to equal 100%. They just happen to be there. We'll change it right now if it wouldn't mess up everything on my questions. But no, I actually like to bring this to their attention anytime it's something like this, right? It doesn't have to be clean, doesn't have to be perfect. It just happens to be that way. Right here, all we do is this. It's the same steps, same numbers. You just go and pull the same numbers from the information. But now we just use those different percents. So this is the only thing that changes. And it changes our number slightly, right? We had, I believe, 79,000 before. Now it's 76,400. I'm not going to go through the whole process again because it quite literally is the same, right? The middle number, since the percentages didn't change here, it's still 48. So same process, different percentages. Now, what's the equivalent unit conversion cost for August? Okay, here's where we need to remember what's a conversion cost. Well, conversion costs, as we so consciously remember, are labor and overhead. And before we just had what's direct material costs divided by units. Here we have to do direct labor and overhead costs divided by units. And we go back and we look at the information provided. Okay, direct labor is 150, overhead is 285. Nothing too crazy there. We add those together, get total conversion costs of 435. And as we do, we take our total costs divided by the amount of units we have to get our cost per unit, our equivalent unit cost of conversion, right? Converting those direct materials to a finished product using labor and overhead gets us to 569. And there we go. That's letter D. Got through 4 questions now, and same process with each. Just to recap here, right? We did the 3-step process to get the equivalent units of production for materials and then equivalent units of production for conversion costs. And then the unit cost of each is just the total cost of materials or total cost of conversion costs divided by what we got, the units of production. So nothing crazy. Document the types of questions you'll be asked, right? So an important thing I like to do for each section, or I guess when I was studying myself, is for each section you go through or you see me do, right? aggregate a list of the types of questions you could be asked. So for equivalent units of production, you could be asked, so far we've seen 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you yourself write your own steps on how to solve those questions. Now, I provided them for you, but it helps to rewrite them yourself so you understand what you're doing. And the best way they say to understand something is to be able to teach it. And oh boy, do I gotta say, that is so true. Having to go back and learn everything in order to be able to teach it properly. Yeah, I understand this much better than I did when I was studying. So right here is what we use for our production. You got this. You will knock these questions out of the park, and let's keep going with them because you are going to do well. So you got this now. It's just a combination of memorization and plug and chug, getting the right information, the right data to be able to answer the questions. Now we change it up and we use the weighted average method. Using the weighted average method, what are the equivalent units of productions for materials? What is the equivalent unit cost of materials? So same questions, right? What are equivalent units of production for materials? And then what's the per unit cost? We'll do that again as well. You see the process is different here, but we'll break it down. All right. And then lastly, what's the equivalent unit conversion cost for August? Well, we'll jump into all of this right now. Okay, so we'll start off, and this is the quote unquote easy part, right? It's just memorization. You just memorize the steps I gave you. Going back to this slide. So what are our units completed? Then what's the ending work in process times the percent completed? So units completed, 68. We got that. Check that off. And then ending work in process times percent completed. Well, ending work in process is 32. Percent completed at the end of the period is 80%. Multiply that both together, and that's going to get us 25,600. Boom. We have letter E, equivalent units of production for materials for weighted average. Much simpler than the FIFO method, and it's great. It's wonderful. Get those even quicker on the exam. Now we want to know, what is the equivalent unit cost of materials for August? Okay, this is the per unit cost now. So first, what are our total costs? We're doing the weighted average method. So this is how we account for it using the weighted average method. And let's go back and take a look. We take our beginning costs and our current cost. The beginning inventory cost, we take all the materials costs. We take 60, we take 375, and that gives us total material costs of 435. We take 435 divided by what we just got for our equivalent units, and we got 93,600. So just a process of memorizing the steps that I am showing here for you, right? So if you're answering questions that we've got and you're in doubt, come back, look at how I'm doing them. This is how you do your equivalent units productions question. You are going to do just great. Understand it's going to take time. Believe me, it's going to take time. You are going to need to memorize and just run through the steps over and over, and it's fine. You all knew what you're signing up for with this exam, right? How many hours it would take, but we're cutting down those hours and making them more efficient. And no fluff. There's no fluff here by any means. The only fluff you have is in your pillow when your head hits it at the end of a nice long day of studying. All right. Now, what is the equivalent unit conversion cost for August under the weighted average method? Now, this is our process, right? We've got our working process beginning of 20,000 units. And where do we derive that from? Well, as we know, we're going to be pulling from our original information over and over, right, everyone? So we take 100% of the beginning WIP. Then we take our units started and completed, which we've seen that 48 before. That's the difference between the 68 and the 20. That's how we get our 48. And then we take 100% of that. And lastly, our work in process ending. Well, we have 45% of that. Well, the ending is 32. 45% complete of conversion costs is what we're dealing with here. So we're going to take 45% of that ending 32. and that gives us 14,400. Now, this is units. And as we remember, we're going to be doing dollars divided by units to get dollars per unit, right? Dollars per unit, that's our ending goal. So what is the total cost? Let's go back to our original information and find out what is going to apply to our conversion costs. All right, looking through here, and super important to remember, right, that conversion costs are labor and overhead. I see 25 in labor, 10 in overhead here. Now that total 35, look at that. It is reflected here, total cost. Go back to our original information as well. And we have some more conversion costs. Costs incurred as well as beginning inventory costs, right? 150 for direct labor and factory overhead 285. We bring all of those numbers together. That gets us to a total of $470,000. As I mentioned, it is dollars per unit, so total dollars divided by total units. We get that by adding all of these wonderful numbers together. That is going to get us $5.70 per unit. Now, I know this is overwhelming. I know this is not fun. By no means am I doing this for fun. If I was having fun, I'd be going around kicking the soccer ball or having a beer with some friends at the bar. That is not what I'm doing right here. I am doing some equivalent units math for you. Memorize the process. This is just how it works, right? Got every type of question that you could see here for you. A through Z. No, we're not going to go all the way to Z, but all the letters. Understand how to solve each type of these, and you'll do super well. Let's keep moving on, get close to being done, and then wrap it up. Last one we have here, using the weighted average method, letter H. What is the total cost of the units in the ending work in process inventory at August 31st, year 5, at the end of this period, at the end of the month? Simply put, right, this is going to be the total cost. Well, what is total cost? I hope that sounds familiar to you because it sounds familiar to me. Total cost is going to constitute our direct materials and conversion costs, or rather our direct materials, direct labor, and overhead. But as we solved for materials and then conversion costs, obviously that can constitute a full set of costs. We go back and we look. Well, spoiler, it is F and G. Right here, equivalent we are looking for equivalent for our total cost for materials. That's letter F. And equivalent unit conversion cost for August, letter G. All right, so we bring these two numbers together over here, and we're going to do a weighted average here. So we're essentially taking, and this is the equivalent units derived from each calculation, 25,600 times the unit cost of 465 gets us to a total cost of $119,040 for materials. We take our weighted average right here of our conversion costs, 570, times our equivalent units of 14,400, and that gets us $82,080. Doing some magic, also known as math here. Add these two together. We get our total cost of the units in ending work in process inventory of $201,120. That is it. That is all, folks. Time to wrap it up. We are done with our equivalent units of production, and as always, a friendly reminder, here is our memorization sheet. Now, definitely memorize this. I want you to for sure memorize how to do. This is the bare minimum, right? This is the bare minimum standard, what I expect you to have memorized for these questions, the process in which to do it. Step 1 is memorize this. Step 2 is be able to apply it. You can do that, you'll be wonderful. I mean, wonderful as is. I'm sure you are. You're a great person. And with this, you'll be perfect for the exam. Wrap it up and finish it out. Hey there. Are you ready to not only pass your CPA exams, but truly understand and enjoy the material while studying? I know it seems impossible, right? Especially to enjoy the material. We'll do it together. Tap into the power of cpa.examprep.ai, where we've got personalized quizzes, multiple choice questions, memorization guides, flashcards, simulations, all tailored to your learning. Our adaptive study planning puts you on the fastest path to success and lifts you back up if you fall behind. Avoid wasting your precious time and money attempting an exam with a low chance of passing, because who wants that? We want to get you through this process as quick as possible. Our exam readiness prediction lets you walk in with confidence, knowing that you're prepared for success on exam day. Thankfully, there's no payment method needed to get started, so why don't you come join us? Visit cpa.examprep.ai and let's achieve your exam success together.